Good morning. We are live on location with Hendrik Grobler. He is a software designer with Design Time, produced software called Stacked, and we're going to talk about that as well as a little bit of his life in living in South Africa. Hendrik, great to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So first part of the introduction, I said you grew up in South Africa, right? Were you born there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm totally curious about that, what life was like in South Africa. I know
Yeah.
nothing about it.
Sure.
What could you say about growing up in South Africa?
Yeah, I mean that's a broad question. I would actually also like to probably hear how what I had as a child sort of compares to what outside is, right? Because like there's a lot of interesting views from outside places. Like even realizing coming here, what ways I thought Canada was going to be and what it actually ended up being like. And then sort of that being said, when someone asks me and my wife about this, it's worth noting that we even give very different answers often. And sometimes we'll spend 15 minutes telling each other how South Africa was, in the sense that like we try and highlight different things. So I just sort of want to preface it with that because it was even in the news recently, with like Trump stuff and things. So like it's a pretty interesting place with some issues, and obviously mine is only one side of it. That being said, I mean, growing up in South Africa, I was born as a freedom baby, is what we call, sort of a post-apartheid era, meaning like I, never really experienced apartheid. Obviously, my parents did and grew up, at least for some period, in that. But for me, South Africa was always what we call the new South Africa, right? Which was much more of like, we call rainbow nation, mixing of cultures. At least in theory, in practice, I'm sure as Canada also knows, it takes quite a long time to right past wrongs and to like reconcile things, right? But like speaking about growing up there, I guess like it's not too different from growing up anywhere else, right? You go to school, you have friends, you have family, you do stuff. But I do think one of the bigger differences from here, and like I see it more the longer we're here, is just like how much crime especially kind of feels, I don't know, it's like a weight lifted from my shoulders, like not having to always think about the crime. Like that's probably the biggest reason we felt that we wanted to leave. And partly so like also talking about growing up there, I guess like I didn't have a terrible childhood or anything. Like it was a pretty good time. I grew up on a farm. It's somewhat ironic for a nerdy kid, but it was a good childhood. Looking back, there's definitely some things where I'm like, oh, that was a bit strange. But in the moment, that's the beauty of being a kid, right? Is like what you like. It's just normal to you, whatever is happening. But we did grow up on a farm, which is like also one of the more controversial sort of topics around South Africa at the moment. Is like because there's a lot around farm murders and stuff. And my granddad, when I was very young, was shot and killed on our farm. But like, I don't know how much of an impact that had on me personally because I was so young, but I definitely think it had a pretty big impact on my dad. And I would say one of the things that I found, I think, again, just looking back on it, because I just took it for granted back then, but I do think he had some choices about how to handle that, how to process that. And I don't think he at least, how it affected me, is he didn't really turn it into a narrative of like, hatred or anything that like soured him. I think like he was always pretty positive about the country. He still is pretty positive about the country and things like that. But that sort of being said, like once I got a little bit older, one of the bigger themes is just like the sort of a lot of memories or things are unfortunately related to like crime and a bit of the corruption and stuff, right? Like it is a third world country. We have something like I think it's like a third of the population unemployment rate, so like 32 or so percent unemployment rate, and then there's like a big history, right, of like people being oppressed or disadvantaged and things, and so and there's also like a lot of racial tension, history kind of thing, right? If that makes sense. And that feeds into what does mean that like where things get a little bit stranger, you know, looking here and the kind of things that like, so I have just over a half-year-old boy now, and like one of the reasons we decided to move to Canada was because we didn't really want to raise kids in an environment where we constantly have to be vigilant. I think it's probably the best way to put it. Because like South Africa, within the bounds of it, again, like it's not that different from any other place in the world. You go to work, you come home, you spend time with your family, like it's, you know, it's all there. But it is like, you know, things like driving late at night is pretty stressful, or at least was for me, right? Because you think about things like carjackings or you know, just various things that can go wrong. So you have to be quite vigilant. And like where we stay, you know, so all of pretty much every house I ever lived in, had palisade fences, which is like, do you know what a palisade fence is? No. They're just sort of like sharpish, spiky fences. So like, it's not like barbed wire, but they're like little beams that go up and they're sharp at the top, right? So it's to encourage or discourage or prevent people from climbing over the fence. And then most people would also have electrified fencing around that, right? Which is, so big emphasis on keeping people out of your property.
Wow.
Right? Which made certain things like community a lot harder in some ways. Like it definitely is less easy to get to know your neighbor if you can't ever see them because they're behind a huge wall. Or things like, you know, we don't celebrate Halloween for various reasons really, but it would be impractical there as well, right? Because like you can't go to someone's door. You would just stand at their gate, right? And you know, and again, because that stuff is prevalent, there's also kind of a distrust among people, right? Because there's always people looking to take advantage of situations and things like that. So something like Halloween in that sense would also not work because someone would exploit the fact that you were letting kids in, or like there's like, you know, it's a bit strange. Interestingly enough, actually, South Africa's banking stuff is really sort of technologically advanced because it's such a high fraud, area. And so like, you know, I think about my dad had a checkbook, but like pretty early on that died, and I've never seen a check since until I came to Canada. And now there's checks here again, which is like, it's a funny thing, but like, you know, it's one of those things that there's maybe it's too easy to commit fraud, or it was phased out sooner because of fraud reasons and things like that, right? So we moved to digital payments very quickly. Sorry, I'm sort of meandering, but bringing it back to kind of just, growing up there. So like, that's the biggest thing, right? There's some memories from, like I said, so I don't remember my granddad much, but like we had one or two home invasions growing up, like nothing terrible in the sense that like each time someone woke up and alerted the house, and then the people that came in fled, which is great, because like I think there's a difference too around crime, right? There's like a question of, is crime like someone stealing your TV? It sucks, but you know, it feels like an invasion of your privacy. But if that's the main thing they want to do, like that's not that bad.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, I think the unfortunate fact is there's a lot of violent crime in South Africa, and a lot of it is, or it feels like hate fueled, in the sense that like you do hear a lot of stories, and not just like always far away. Sometimes like a degree or so away, you hear about friends of friends, or friends who's were broken into, and you know, they tied up the family, and like again, if you're lucky, that's where it stops. And like, so that as a theme, it sort of weighs on you a little bit. I think is the best way to put it. Like, you know, an example too of how life is different is when we went to bed. Most families I know have an extra security gate in the sort of hallway where they sleep, so that you have this extra divide between your house and where you sleep, because that's when you're most vulnerable, right? Is when you're sleeping, and that's where most break-ins and stuff occur. And so again, you're just at least there trying to say, cool, break into my house, steal my stuff if you really want to, but like, you know, stay away from from us. If you know, and that's not like if someone's breaking down that gate, you know they're there to cause harm, kind of thing.
Wow, holy! I'll be honest, I wasn't prepared for those answers.
Okay.
Yeah, wow, that was unexpected, definitely.
I think, but sorry, I do want to emphasize again. It's not a war zone. It's not a terrible place, right? Like we did, again, for the most part, had fairly normal lives. Had good friends, schools, did a bunch of stuff. But there was always this bit of an undertone. Is the reality.
And you're just always prepared then.
Yeah, I think it got worse the older I get. When you're a kid again, you're in this wonderful place of you just trust your parents and everything is fine, everything is safe, right? And but as I got older, especially like when I started having my own family, like Dante was born here, but we started thinking ahead, and once Alicia and I got married and things, it's hard not to think about what you would do in certain situations. Like I definitely remember there were some nights where it just like, I don't know, I almost mentally let myself get into a space where I was spending too much time thinking about what do I do if someone breaks in, right? Like what, because we didn't really have guns in the house or anything, but it is just a question of like, I don't know. It's just hard to not sometimes think about that, but it is also not especially helpful for your mental health to dwell on that kind of thing.
Yeah. So you were older when you left and moved here. How long have you been here?
3.5 to close to 4. I think we're probably almost just about 4 years now.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So then you hear Canadians talk about crime, and you're probably just like calling us crybabies.
I think it's, like, well, you learn that things are relative to people, right? I think for us, definitely, we are like, but even funny, in the beginning, it was a little bit hard to not follow some of the habits in South Africa. It was hard to almost come into a house here and there's less security and not feel a bit nervous about that, right? I think what was very helpful at some point is we actually made friends with an RCMP officer, and just hearing them talk about like how infrequently things happen, and also just putting a face to someone in the police, because I think we also had a bit of a rough time with the police in South Africa in itself. Like I suppose I can elaborate that if you want to hear more, but just to say that it took a bit of time to adjust, to to actually sort of be at peace with sort of the lower levels of security and stuff here, and things have been great. Like, yeah, I think there is an element where we're like, you guys don't have real problems, but it's I do think it also comes from the perspective that you realize, like, even in South Africa, we experienced far fewer bad things than a lot of other people did, right? So it's important to like view a lot of things through the lens of like, I was very blessed in some sense to not have worse experiences back home, right? So like it's kind of nuanced, but we certainly appreciate just being able to walk outside or forget a door open for a bit and it not being a big deal, or just like be a little bit more at peace.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where you got your education and everything, was there in South Africa?
Yeah. So I went to a university called Monash University. Funnily enough, actually, like I sort of went to primary school and then went to high school and went to university all within like a 50-kilometer radius. So I actually had a kind of a small world in that sense growing up. And my wife also actually is within that radius, lived within that radius. So it's kind of a small world there. But yeah, like I went to school to an Afrikaans primary school, which was quite nice. And like it's interesting too when we talk about like South Africa. Like in my schooling career, again, like it was a really nice kind of glimpse of where the country wants to be or what it could be, because like growing up we were a bunch of mixed races and cultures and things in class, and like it was actually great because there was almost never really issues of racism things in that little sort of microcosm that was our school. But then like outside of the world there was still a lot of like problems, but it was good. And then I went to university and started studying software engineering, or I can't remember quite what the degree was called. It was something with networking and information technology or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
How did you know that was what you wanted to do?
I it was pretty obvious, honestly, because like I mentioned, I was a nerdy kid. So even growing up on a farm, we got a computer. My parents had no idea how to. My dad still to this day doesn't really use computers, so they didn't have much of an idea how to regulate us or monitor us on a computer. So we spent what I would classify as probably an unhealthy amount of time on a computer, but it was also great because like we learned a lot through trial and error, which I think is one of the better ways to learn anything, right? Is you make enough mistakes, or when you make mistakes, the lesson sticks with you really well,
Oh yeah.
right? I remember the one time I did something and the computer sort of went into, I recognize now there was in sort of a command line mode, and it would like, even when you shut it down, it would start up in the command line thing. So essentially I broke our computer for a while because we didn't have to get out of it. And we had to wait until, I think some friends of our family or somebody came over that knew anything about computers. And they just like, I think they literally just typed the word exit into the thing and then it was fixed. But we were stuck on it for, I don't know, a couple days, maybe a couple weeks. You know, and so in that sense, like I got to tinker with computers both on the software and hardware side from young.
Yeah.
And then during high school, I dabbled in like game making. You know, started off very basic with like I think it used to be called Game Maker. It's like you could sort of drag and drop things, right? Like it's a good way to start because it's very visual. And like games are a great thing because you get this kind of instant feedback. It's always like you make something fun to show your friends, right?
Yeah.
Showing like I don't know, a calculator is kind of boring, but I do remember I made one game where you defended off teachers who were bringing you homework. You know, so you could kind of like make little things that were a reflection of your world or that your friends found fun or funny and stuff. And so when I got to grade 10, that's when we get to choose our subjects. And so one of these sort of extra subjects that was available was, I think it was IT something, but it was software learning to code, essentially, right? Maybe it was called programming. There's a lot of words for the same thing. And we were a tiny class. We were a class of, I think we started with 5, and we ended with 3.
Wow.
Small group, but it was actually really fun because it was essentially me and 2 friends, and you know, our teacher was a great guy. He was one of the more eccentric people I've met, but it was really cool too because like he had some very principled ways of doing things, which I think in some ways still stick with me today, right? Like he had a sense of like this is good, this is bad, in terms of how you design software. Anyways, but so doing that and stuff, like I was pretty good at it, and so when it came time to study further, it wasn't really even much of a question. It was mostly just like where, but not so much what, because like I knew I wanted to do something in software. And one of the interesting things on Monash did, one of the reasons I liked Monash was they offered a bit more of a stronger focus on computer stuff earlier, whereas like a lot of, some of my friends did more of a bachelor BSc in engineering, which I think is pretty common here too. You do engineering for the first 2 years. It's a lot of physics, maths, and science stuff, and then you sort of go over into, then you start doing more software stuff. But you also, and it's a nice balanced approach. I don't have any problems with it, but one thing I did like about the management, it was different in the sense that it was focused from the get-go on like software stuff. It was more like, our different subjects were more to do with networks and databases and all kinds of sort of getting into the meat of that stuff that I was most interested in a little bit sooner.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you know what a VIC-20 is, or Commodore 64? Have you heard of that?
I've a VIC, Commodore, not a VIC, but a Commodore. Yeah, that was definitely before my time.
Yeah.
But
so, okay, how old are you?
I am 34 now.
34, okay. So I grew up with a VIC-20 in the house,
Okay.
which is below, it must be 20K compared to Commodore 64, which is 64K.
Yeah.
So I grew up with a VIC-20
Okay.
in the house. And so I'm 10 years younger than you.
Okay.
And for us growing up, we actually had games on this, but we had to program the games ourselves before we could play it.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
so if
so
we wanted
cool.
to play tic-tac-toe, we turned it on and we sat there pecking away at the keys for
Until
half
you had
an hour.
tic-tac-toe.
Yeah. And then once we were done programming, then we could play the game.
Okay. I mean, that's amazing, right? Like, there's no motivation having to make the thing that you want. That's really cool. Did you ever
Yeah.
consider doing that more? Like, I'm assuming you enjoyed it, right? Did you
Oh, yeah.
ever consider going into software?
I actually studied electronics in college,
Okay.
but after finishing the electronics and after getting into the electronics, I found that I like taking wires and LEDs and buttons and stuff like that
Yeah.
and interfacing them with computers.
Okay,
So-
so more on the hardware side of things a little bit.
Yeah. So
Okay.
so because I already had that computer background and
Mm-hmm.
that knowledge from like early on, like by the time I went to college, that was 15, 20 years later than
Yeah, a
like
lot
20,
changed
right?
in that time, right?
Yeah, but a lot stayed the same still. Like it was still, I wasn't programming with if statements back then. It was totally different. So it was actually easier later. I already
Because
kind of
programming
had
had come. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, I already had the theory. So
Cool.
when I had the chance to be able to like hit the space bar and turn on the red LED, or hit tab and turn on the green one,
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool.
That is there is
You
even
know?
to this day there's like I tinker
Yeah.
with sort of embedded devices and hardware and making a little motor or light move sometimes. It's
Yeah.
actually quite different in its nuance to something like software. And you often work with much more constrained things, right? Because you have
Yeah.
only so much memory, only so much. So you have to be incredibly efficient. Whereas, at least on the consumer side, we have the luxury of having gigabytes of RAM and stuff
Yeah.
these days.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. Like I find that it's there is something very cool about like especially making something that physically does something, right? It's quite a different experience from having something digitally do something.
Yeah, yeah.
That's very
Yeah, and it was funny because I remember like one other thing was we had those games. There was like Hangman, Tic-Tac-Toe, like very, very simple games.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so you're flipping through the book and you're trying out all these different games. And I got to this one game. And I remember I was like, it's called Mort Gauge. I have no idea what that game is, but I'm going to program it. So I sat there programming it, again, half hour, 45 minutes, an hour. And I program it, and I get it up on the screen, and big Mort Gauge logo appears, and there's boxes to enter numbers, and I'm entering numbers, and I'm like, this is like boring.
That's the worst game
Dad,
ever.
what is this? Then I find out it's a mortgage calculator, right?
That's amazing. You did a mortgage calculator.
Yeah, but it's
funny.
yeah, all these programs that people have already developed, and they give you the code for it, and then you go
You just
home
do it?
and you do it yourself. But like as a kid, right? You're just going through the book. You
Yeah.
have no idea what it is,
Yeah.
what to expect.
Well, I mean, that's kind of how I shut down a computer for a while. It's because I thought the command line interface, I just saw the command part, and we had a game called Commandos, right? And I thought, oh, this is, and like, again, looking back at it, why would there just be a game called Commandos just randomly on our computer? But like, I was like, oh,
yeah.
cool, this must be a game. And then there we go. Now we're stuck in the command line interface.
Oh yeah,
It is
yeah.
funny. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
that's so cool.
Yeah, that command line interface stuff was something else I grew up with.
Yeah.
With DOS,
Yeah.
Like, so if you were ever to give me a computer that was like had DOS, I could totally navigate.
Still navigate? It's still
directories.
there?
Oh,
Yeah, I think
for
you do
sure.
better than I would because I'm more, I guess I use Linux like command line interface a lot these days, but that's very different from Windows. There's actually
Yeah.
most of the sort of commands for getting around aren't the same or anything, so I would feel pretty awkward actually on one of those older ones, whereas, yeah.
Yeah. No, sometimes I'll open up the command line interface in Windows and I'll go C drive / program files,
Yeah.
x86 to get
Yeah.
into the right folder and
It's a good skill to
copy
have.
star and copy it over to a disk because it's faster than navigating through the folders
Yeah.
and highlighting them and dragging
And it
and
feels
copying
good
them.
too, right? You're just like, you kind of just, it's got like this nice cadence to it if you're just
Yeah.
doing stuff.
Well, if you know where a file is, it's easier to just type the path to it and
Yeah.
tell it to copy it to E drive or something, right? Plug
Yeah.
a flash drive in.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then talking hardware again, I'll just be quick with this
No,
because
it's all good.
with the VIC-20, it got to the point where we were able to save our programs. So my dad bought this tape drive, and it
Okay.
was like a physical cassette tape.
Yeah.
Like you pop a cassette tape in, and you hit like record on it, I think, and then I can't remember exactly how it worked, but you were able to transfer your program from the computer to this tape drive.
Okay, so you didn't have to
And-
do things from scratch every time you wanted to play Tic Tac Toe,
Yeah,
right? Okay.
yeah. The only thing that was difficult was you had to like rewind it to the right spot to find where the file is, because
That is crazy.
yeah. So you might have like 3 or 4 files in there. And now imagine a tape drive where you're like, you've got tic-tac-toe, you've got hangman, you've got it saved.
Yeah.
And you want to save a third program on it, and you have to like fast forward and make sure you don't click
Overwrite
just
one of the
end.
others. Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
right. And that happened often. Like
You
that's
broke
just
it?
how it was. Yeah, you
Yeah.
would overwrite part of the program, and then when you went to load it back up into the computer, you would see it loading like line by line, like line 10, line 20, line 30, right?
Really?
And it would get to like 920 and stop, right? And then start over back at 1 because
I
it was
see.
loading the next program.
I see. So you have to stop it at the right time too, then essentially.
Yep, yep. And then in that case where it loaded the other program over top of it, you
Yeah.
had to write from line 920 to 1200 to finish the program again because it was gone. Like
That
it
is
was
crazy.
literally overwritten.
Because I mean, I grew up with VHS, which has a little bit of parallels, obviously, with the rewinding
Yeah.
and stuff. But like doing that on a computer sounds crazy. Like I barely had floppies when we were young. Like that's kind of where we entered. But like realistically, most of my time I spent with CDs. So
Yeah.
like CDs to tapes that you manually rewind is even a big gap in that, right?
Yeah.
That's really cool, actually.
I was going through some of my old college stuff and I pulled out a floppy disk and it said backup disk written on it.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? This was my whole backup.
Of
this
your
was
college
all-
work and stuff?
Yeah, this was all my work was backed up on this 1.4 meg floppy disk.
Yeah, that's
And-
crazy.
Yeah, and you think about that now, like a photo on your phone
Yeah.
is like 30 meg, right? Like you
Yeah.
would need 25 of those disks to save it.
It is fascinating thinking just like, because that's looking back at how far, even just in my own life, right? So yours goes back a bit further, but like how much technology has changed in a span of 20, 30 years, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe 40. And then trying to extrapolate, right? And say like, what does that look when like my son is ready to go to college? Like, what does that look like, right? Because technology has this kind of exponential growth factor to it, right? Where you're like, it doesn't grow at the same rate because there's more technology, more sort of compounding in advancement. You typically get kind of like an exponential growth, and it's been very interesting. I just trying to figure out, because like AI obviously is here to stay, and like that certainly also probably accelerates that curve a bit. Have you seen the 3-body problem?
No.
So it's we watched the show. I didn't read the book, but it's this. There's just a part in it. So I'll try and keep it somewhat spoiler free. But it's just this concept that like there's an alien race that's coming to Earth, and they are much more advanced than we are. But it'll take them, I think, 400 years to get here. And like one of the things that really struck me is like they speak about how like by the time they get here, we will be more advanced than they are, right? And then they sort of just kind of step through like how we went from like industrial aged and like advanced into computers and where we are now in a span of like less than 100 years kind of thing. And so you compound that into 400 years. That is a lot. Like that's actually, it's kind of, it doesn't seem like that much time, but like, at least in this fictional universe, we are more advanced than these crazy advanced aliens by the time they get to us. So I don't know, I found it an interesting way of sort of just highlighting like how much stuff actually like it changes and how quickly it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually interesting because I read this one book. It's kind of like an alien spin-off, those alien movies?
Yeah, yeah.
So there's some books written by a totally different author that are kind of just like side quests.
Okay.
I call them. Like,
Yeah.
And what they had talked about in that book was early colonizers. They left our solar system to go colonize other planets out in the universe, right, or out in the
Okay.
galaxy, and that's why there's these colonies kind of all over the place, and some of them were being attacked by the aliens, right? But at one point, we advanced so much that we sent out new ships that actually overtook the earlier
older
ships that were
That's
sent out.
crazy.
Yeah. So these earlier ships were supposed to take like 4,000 years to get to where they were going, and then like 200 years later, they sent a new ship and they passed them, right?
So that must suck to be the people on
Yeah.
the old ship. You get there, and people, you thought you were going to be first.
Yeah.
And people got there before you. And not only that, you're essentially a relic now.
Right? Yeah.
That's cool.
If you went to if you were, on the trajectory to the same planet as them,
Yeah.
you end up, and they colonize it like 3,800 years before you.
At least you get there and it's pretty set up, so maybe that's not too bad, but I would
Yeah.
definitely feel like a bit of a relic of my time, right? That's kind of
Yeah.
crazy.
So that's kind of like the same sort of idea.
Yeah.
What's that called?
A three-body problem.
Oh.
There's the Netflix made it a show, like there's only one season so far, but it's based on a series of, I think it's 3 books. Yeah, and so it's good sci-fi. Like it's crunchy, and like again, I'm sure the book is probably the better version, but the series is good too. So I recommend it as a watch if you like sci-fi stuff.
I'm gonna check it out. That sounds right up my alley.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Sweet.
Okay, back on to software. I wanted to ask you, because you do this programming, you develop software. So I want to talk about, like, there was always a push, or recently there's been a push to get people into STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, math. And they want to get people coding, like more people coding. They believe that that's kind of the future.
Yeah.
So, like, what would you say to somebody, like a young person that's kind of considering going into university and they want to get into computer programming? Like, what would they have to expect? Jumping into that, like, what does programming look like? What does a career in programming look like?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I picture the guy sitting in front of a computer. It's 2 a.m. They've got a couple empty cans of Red Bull beside them, right? I picture that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's not always inaccurate either. I mean, it's a really interesting time to ask this, because I think the landscape of software is changing in some ways, again, with AI. So I'll touch on that in a bit too. But I think with a lot of things is probably expected to suck for a bit and to be hard, right? Because like when you're learning a new skill, like programming, right? And I mean, you've gone through some of it yourself. It is hard in the beginning, right? And like a lot of it doesn't make sense and things, but like I do think one of the things that's really important is it's a lot like math, in the sense that like it's very building blocks, right? So if you miss a crucial block, you're not suddenly going to do great later because you ignored that block. Like it very builds on top of each other. So I do think it's important to spend time to get the foundations right and make sure you understand those things, right? So if you're starting programming for the first time or something, like I would say like make sure you spend the time to get the foundations right, and then like at the same time do something that's like fun, because programming for the sake of programming isn't really, it's not gonna like drive you to excel or like anything, right? Being passionate about it, having sort of a goal in mind, really is a strong motivating factor. You know, some people can do it regardless, but like if you are really excited to say make a game or do something cool with it, like, because that's what software programming is, right? It's just a tool. At the end of the day, it's a way to solve problems using computers, and like, you know, the caliber of problems we solve these days is sometimes different, and the tools we have at our disposal are quite different. And so similarly with AI, is like can be an amazing assistive tool in learning program, right? Because it's like essentially like you have an expert often within arm's reach, right? Like if you're struggling with something, especially if you're just learning programming, you're probably not running into a problem that is like extremely difficult or complicated. It's obviously to you it's super confusing, but like an AI kind of there is really helpful in helping you. But there's also the risk of using the AI to do the work, in which case you never, or you run that risk again of missing those foundational skills yourself, right? And even if only AI is writing software at some point, like learning how to think like a computer thinks, like, because the thing is, it's probably one of the hardest steps, right? Is like, there's very few parts of programming where the computer can just understand what you want. You have to be incredibly specific about how everything should happen, right? And I don't know, have you seen that video with the dad who gets his kids to make the PB&J sandwiches?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like I always love that as an example, right? Because it's like, and I think I might try that with my own kid one day, because it's just a really fun way of showing that like, there's a lot as humans that we imply and understand based on context, but mostly in a computer, you know, it doesn't know even how to like, you know, open the bread. You have to say like, put, you know, hand here, put hand here. What is that? Like, it just, You have to be incredibly specific and detailed and in a very step-by-step basis. And that's what's hard learning about programming is everything is like so detailed. You have to be. So learning that process is really important. And I think one should be careful about shortcutting some of the lessons you learn the hard way by leaning a lot on AI. And once you know that sort of step of thinking, because a big part of writing software is also knowing how to figure out what is wrong or why something breaks. Because no matter how far software's come, sometimes you just get an error that says something went wrong, right? And then you're like, okay, so where do I even start? We have tens of thousands of lines of code, and one of the really important skills of a software developer is not always writing code, but being able to maintain and understand and debug your own and other people's code, right? Because in reality, you never almost write code in a vacuum. You're going to be working with other people. You're going to be interacting with other people's code and stuff like that. So again, that process of learning through trial and error and making mistakes and learning from them, like as much as AI can short circuit some of those things, at some point AI is going to do something that you need to then figure out what went wrong. So that's still a useful skill, a really useful skill to have.
That's something my wife and I have joked about a lot because I'm like a very logical thinker.
Okay.
Right? And I do need specifics. Like
Okay.
I'll constantly ask for specifics.
Yeah.
And what you're saying about the peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it's like the one that I've heard is wife gives her husband a shopping list, or she tells him, go to the grocery store and pick up eggs. Or no, go to the grocery store and pick up milk. If they have eggs, get a dozen. Right?
I can see where this is going.
Yeah. So in computer language,
Yeah.
if you wrote that out, like go to the grocery store, right? Get milk, right? If they have eggs, get a dozen. So the guy comes home with a dozen jugs of milk, right? But yeah, if you were to write those instructions out to a computer, the computer would give you a dozen jugs of milk as well. So
100%. It's interesting too, because like I find there's some parallels with me and my wife as well. Like I sometimes ask too many questions because I want to disambiguate things.
Yeah.
Because again, that's sort of how my brain is wired. But I also recognize that sometimes I could probably just, make a bet on which one's the best. Because I think sometimes she gets annoyed that like I just, don't just take the thing and do it. Like I have like 10 follow-up questions thinking about like everything. And it's funny because that's I think one of the beauties of marriage is you kind of, help to balance each other, because I can be overly analytical and sometimes to a detrimental degree, and she sometimes can be very sort of let's just do it, and both sides have benefits. Either one can also be a little bit problematic on its own. So that's pretty cool actually.
Yeah, it's funny. It's the way I think you probably have to have that kind of mindset to be a good programmer, right?
Yeah. Doing it definitely, it's like a muscle, right? You do exercise it. So it doesn't mean, I think, if you don't do it, especially lots to begin with, you can't do it. I think like you can, it's like your brain, you could train your thought patterns a little bit. But I do think if you already excel, that's why math and physics and stuff are often related to programming. It's like they're not prerequisites, I'd say, right? Realistically, unless you're in very specific fields, you're not doing like crazy math, right? But the sort of very step-by-step thinking is applicable to both. And so a lot of people who are strong at math naturally do well at programming, but it's not a guarantee, and the inverse isn't true either, in the sense that like you can be bad at math and enjoy programming, because they do scratch different itches as well. If I can put it that way,
Yeah. You had mentioned AI earlier, and it being like a tool, or it being like an assistant to kind of sit by you when you're working. How do you see the AI like in the future? Do you think a person's going to actually be able to make a program without knowing how to code? Do you think he'll ever get there?
Maybe. It depends, I think, on the complexity of the program. And a part of the other side of that question is, would I use a piece of software that was coded by AI, knowing, because like I think there have been some apps even now that have popped up, and then some of them have had sort of glaring security issues.
Right.
You know, so that's not to say it'll stay that way forever. Because there's an interesting world where if you throw enough AI at a problem, maybe it fixes it, right? Because theoretically, you could have AI write the code, then you could have like 3 different AIs review the code, and like, you know, if you like, there's a world maybe you throw it enough. But the thing that is hard to get around, and this is why software is hard, is because even to an AI, you have to be fairly specific in your needs, right? Like, like it's about communication at the end of the day. Like, and that's again part of my job is talking to people and translating what they want, right, into software. And like even that is problematic. Often, like if you just take one of the lessons you learn in software is like don't just take people's word for what they want, right? Like they'll say, oh, we just need a button here that does this. But like, you know, in software you're often building systems of things that interact in certain ways. So from a technical side, you often are better positioned or positioned in a way that like helps you direct things in a certain direction that sort of better fits in the overall design of things. And like again, there's a give and take there. But yeah, the idea of, you know, you could just say, hey, software, I want an app that does X or Y. And if it's a simple app, I do think that goes away, right? But if you're building a sufficiently complicated piece of software, like say Stacked is definitely not the most complicated thing on earth, but we have lots of different modules and things that interact with each other, right? Like to build Stacked from an AI is, you know, it's not like it's only one prompt, but like to start with, there's a lot for you to figure out in terms of how things should actually process and work and stuff, right? Because again, coding is just turning rules or steps or systems into things machines can understand. So you need those systems first, right? You need to envision how things are going to work and fit together. And when you do this, this happens. And like, so in some sense, and I do think like the current software developers are well positioned to do that because that's what they do anyways. But they can maybe get a little less granular, right? So you can tell the AI to make a sandwich and it can do some of the things without you explicitly having to tell it what to do, right? Like you can maybe say, put the jam on the bread and it will actually spread the jam instead of taking the bottle of jam and putting it on top of the bread physically, right? Which is kind of like the funny thing. So I do think it's here to stay. It's going to change things. Like it is a good tool at the moment, and like there's a lot of push to try and have stuff have an AI just produce like a full app in one go and it's done. And I appreciate some of it because like I'm not a great designer at heart. So AI is great there for prototyping designs, and like so right now it has use too, right? Like I think rapid prototyping and helping sometimes be a rubber duck. I don't know if you like know the term, but like rubber ducking is sometimes in software we talk about this idea that like some people have a little rubber duck by their desk. I don't actually have ever met anyone who has one, but the idea is you explain your problem to the duck, and in the process of explaining it, you find the issue. And because that's what often happens when you talk to other developers. You'll say it to one, hey, I'm having this issue, could you mind just sort of helping me here? And they don't even have to say anything. Just in the process of you explaining the problem to them, so a light goes on and you realize what the issue is often.
I've solved that problem countless times by writing an email to somebody.
Oh, yeah.
I would say, they would ask for something and I would say, okay, I can definitely do that. But if we do that, then this is going to happen. And if we do that, then we're going to have to think about this and we're going to have to think about that. And by the time I'm done the email, I've got the answer, right?
Yeah.
And so, that's the same thing.
Yeah, I'm sure it's actually, it's not just a software thing. And so like that's a cool part. And I think AI can be really assistive in that too, because it isn't just a dead inanimate object. It can actually ask clarifying questions and maybe help guide you if you still are stuck. But it's really hard to say like where things end up. I think it hurts junior developers the most at the moment, partly because like, they might be very tempted to lean into AI, which may make them in the long term slightly weaker developers if they're not learning those skills. But there might also be a whole wave of essentially like AI developers. Like I think what's hard is like I'm a more senior developer, which means I have a harder time sort of trusting AI, right? Because I have like, the more you work in the field, the more opinions you have about things that are good and bad, and the more like off of experience, you learn lessons, right? And so I do find I'm more reluctant to let AI run with larger problems and like just sort of be internally fine with that being probably of varying quality or things like I need to kind of know what it did and make sure like I know that I understand that code, because again, realistically right now, if it breaks,
Yeah.
I have to fix it, not the AI. Or I can help fix it, but it's my job on the line. The AI doesn't care. So yeah, that does make it a bit tricky. But at the same time, like I do have a friend who's like learning to program at the moment, actually sort of making a career switch quite later into their career and stuff. But they found that they really have a passion for the software stuff. But they've also been a lot more eager to adopt AI assisted workflows or like giving like more full blown tasks to the AI and sort of it coming back sometime later and being done, right? And it's been really interesting. So there's a world too where like that, if that is the future, those developers can have a bit of sort of a leg up, like if they, because it's going to be a learning experience too for all of us, like current software devs, in learning in how to use these new software tools. Because again, there's so much noise going on, and AI changes like one week to the other. Who's the better one? Which one's better for coding? Which one's better for this? So there's a lot of influx at the moment, and it is exhausting sometimes trying to keep up. Like we built a knowledge-based kind of chatbot for Stacked, and like the first version was all right, but we definitely learned some lessons, and it was tricky getting it like again sort of consistency out of it, right? Because that's the hardest part of any AI is they're great, but they still hallucinate or make mistakes, and then you have to somehow figure out how to deal with that. But like within, I think, a month of us doing that, like a better version was available that solved a lot of the issues we had manually been trying to fix. It just solved it sort of as part of the training or as part of the model itself.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know, it's evolving a lot, and it's really hard to say where it'll land, honestly. But I am somewhat optimistic, at least, that like software developers won't just disappear overnight. But I do think for juniors, depending on what they do, and it can also hurt in the sense that like some companies might see it as an opportunity to replace lower like junior developers with AI, right? Which is a little bit more plausible, but that still has it's a very short-term view, because like eventually junior developers become intermediate and become senior developers, right? Whereas if you're cutting out that line, then there's not like that progression. So it's a bit risky, but I can't tell you where it's going for sure either, to be honest.
Yeah, and really, like, you still need to know what you're prompting it with.
Yeah.
So if you've got text boxes on the screen, or you've got those drop-down combo boxes with lists and stuff in them, like, you still somewhat need to know what that is, how it works.
Yeah, the building blocks that it can use, right?
Yeah. So that's why I was wondering if people just with no programming experience would be able to eventually get into it, or do you need at least like a core framework understanding that you can kind of go from there?
Yeah, I think, again, there's a world where if the AI asks you enough follow-up questions, because, again, like, sometimes the question is, like, does it matter what things are, like, like, let's say you just sound like, hey, I want to build Facebook, right? One of the questions might be, okay, so do you want it on web? Do you want it on desktop? Like, I think there is a world where AI can ask enough clarifying questions, like a human would, to kind of guide you to a point where you are giving it the answers it needs, right? But I think a lot of them are pretty eager at the moment. You give it something and it just sort of runs with it, and it can often run in the completely wrong direction.
Yeah.
But like, they are learning, like web is very popular because like obviously a lot of the scraping is happening on the web and stuff. So like with the prototypes we've used, they use a lot of, like, I don't think you're going to get like an award-winning design or anything from an AI at least at this point, right? But they're pretty good at making things that conform to a pretty wide established standard. And like if you look at the web today, a lot of stuff with your like, the way you do drop downs and inputs and stuff, like that's very common across almost every website. And there's even within that, like you'll notice, I remember Google did material design for a while, which is a kind of design language, and that was so prevalent for a long time, And like everywhere you had things were like material design, which like you could tell quite easily. We're moving away from that now, maybe in a good way, because it was just a bit old. Everything was looking the same. But like AI is also probably consequently very good at generally following those patterns. So it certainly helps if you can get from the get-go give it a bit more direction because you know what you want. But I think there's a world where AI could just ask enough questions too that it can, guide you to where you want to go, like a human roughly would. I think, but it is like the more you're prompting too, I think the more there's room for things to go off the rails.
Yeah.
Right. I think, and like we're seeing that with like large amounts of context is still something we're struggling to solve, right? And code bases are often like tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of lines of code. So yeah, that is tricky. And like I think one of the interesting things in software too is like to sort of set expectations about people coming into it is like the hard part when you start to code is learning to code, right? But then after a couple of years, like the coding part, the logic, the building blocks are the same even across other languages, right? There's some nuanced differences. But I find in my career at least like much more of my time or my thinking effort is spent organizing code than necessarily writing like code that is rocket science adjacent or like is these like incredibly complicated things. In fact, like generally speaking, simplicity is probably better. It's one of those things again where if you can make something simpler, it helps make it easier to reason about and things going forward. But like you are writing thousands of lines of code probably a week, and like that adds up, and so pretty quickly you have lots and lots of code. And like the interesting thing is like there's a lot of ways to me of like organizing code and like ways of making sure you don't repeat yourself. Like there's a principle called DRY, don't repeat yourself, as one of the sort of principles we're taught in software engineering, right? And like that means often is like don't take code and copy and paste it into 10 different places.
Oh yeah, recall that function.
Yeah, they're like reuse it. And so because the problem there is if you need to change any part of that logic, you need to go find all 10 places and change them. And if you're not the one doing it, you might not even know where all 10 places are. And that's tricky, right? If you're lucky they used some kind of wording or naming that makes it, so you can sort of search across everything and find it. But if they didn't or whatever, it's, you might have to kind of comb through the whole project or risk something breaking because it wasn't updated correctly. And that's how bugs often happen, right? Is like a fix or an idea not being applied consistently. And so, it is also worth noting that like that's a really big part of the software development journey as a career and stuff is like learning all these techniques for organizing code and making sure that you're reusing code. And even like those principles can be taken too far. Like there's one of the companies I worked at, we had this area of the code that we used to call abstraction hell. And so it was just, it took some of these ideas that decouple things and whatever and like give things single responsibility. So there's like, again, these principles. It took them to like the nth degree. And what that meant is it was so difficult to just get to the part where like the logic happens. You had to jump through like so many hoops just to find the thing where a thing happens. And then you want to find the next thing that uses that thing. And it's not like next to it. It's like 10 layers up and down again. And like it was interesting because in theory, these things make you more productive and make code more maintainable. But in this case, it actually had the exact opposite effect because it made it so obtuse to work with. So, that's kind of a part of the journey too, is like, because as an engineering person, you want to make elegant solutions. You want to make things that click together in nice ways and are resilient to different kinds of change and future scenarios and all that stuff. And that's a lot of software is balancing those things too. It's saying like, what do I need now? What are we likely to need in future? But you can take that way too far as well and try and make something incredibly flexible, because each level you go up, you also tend to increase complexity and like scope creep and stuff like that. So personally, it's been an interesting journey too, going through like over-engineering solutions sometimes, and then coming back to sometimes it's okay to copy and paste something because it's only going to be in two places, and like doing not that, like making them into one thing can again let like sometimes that thing becomes like an abomination because it's one thing that's trying to do everything, and that sometimes is worse than just letting two things diverge naturally as they would, kind of thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. I know exactly what you mean, and I've come across stuff like that.
Okay,
and
that's cool.
we're familiar, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with AI then,
Yeah.
and with Stacked, you haven't really talked too much about Stacked, but
Sure.
Stacked is a software that you've developed, right? You've got other programmers that work with you.
Yeah, so it started with Access Engineering, which is a structural engineering company. They essentially saw a need to have something help them run the practice, and they partnered with a Brazilian developer a couple of years ago to sort of get that rolling, right? Essentially, he started working for Access and started building this, and there was a version 1 of Stacked. Obviously, it wasn't called Stacked back then. It was just, Access's ERP is what, like the term that we use often is ERP. It just, it's an enterprise resource planning is what it stands for, but that just means like it's a piece of software that tries to run your firm, right? Like it has modules and parts for most of the things your company needs, right? It has contacts and projects and accounting and invoicing and like, those things. It tries to integrate all of that stuff because when they're all talking to each other, you get kind of a synergistic efficiency. You don't have to repeat stuff as often.
Yeah.
So it started on that. I, interestingly enough, met Bruce, who's the CEO of Design Time and also a partner at Access, at a baby shower while just through mutual friends. At the time, I was working for a company based in Toronto called Uberflip. I was working remotely because I'm sure you're not surprised that there's not a massive software engineering market in Prince George, right? To change that would be great. But so I met him there, and we just got talking, and it sort of happened that there was a really good overlap in terms of skills needed too. And at the same time, this developer that had been developing the first version or iteration of Stacked for several years then needed to go back home. And so timing-wise, things worked out that I essentially took over from him. And then still for a bit, it was inside of Access, right? Building it. And then at some point, we essentially decided that we want to turn Stacked into what it is today, into something that is, a lot more flexible and like not just for Access, right? And that wasn't a small task. Like, again, even looking back, like there's a lot more stuff that was Access specific than we, I think, even realized. And we had to sort of not rip those out, but like change those things to be more broadly generic and applicable to not just one person's or one company's way of doing things.
Yeah.
And so that's the part that sort of I spearheaded. And when at that time too, like we decided it would be better to split it out into its own company and its own IP and its own thing, and that's how Design Time was born, and Stacked, out of that.
Okay.
Yeah, and so like to just sort of briefly touch on what Stacked is, like it's an operational piece of software that tries to make engineers' time like better, like or use of time better. There's especially in engineering, a lot of like engineering related disciplines, you have billable hours, right? And then you have overhead hours. And so one big thing we're trying to help is to reduce just how much time you're spending doing admin or things, right? Like if we save you 5 minutes a day on something, it doesn't seem like a lot, but over a year, that does really add up, especially over a year, over multiple personnel and stuff like that. So, and the thing, to be honest, is there's a lot of project management software, right? Like you can throw a brick in any direction and you're going to hit a piece of project management software.
Yeah.
And so with Stack too, the thing that we are finding that we're more our niches and what we're good at is around projects, especially the documents in projects, because it's engineering, structural engineering, others. It's pretty regulated industry, right? Like nobody likes it if if a building collapses, like there's severe consequences. So there's a lot of things in place to make sure that structural engineers are doing their job in a way that is kind of safe or leads to less accidents or things happening, right? And so that does mean that there's quite a lot of compliance and stuff that happens around projects and things you should be doing to prove that you are, doing due diligence and making sure what you like the stuff you're doing is safe and done in a professional manner. But that stuff takes time to do and over it. And so one of the things in Stack that's been really helpful for people is a lot of the stuff we try and make that really streamlined and quick and easy to almost like incidentally just do stuff that is nice for if you ever get audited. Then there's like a really nice trail for the auditor, and you can show, hey, these things, I did them all, but they're not costing you hours of time which you aren't billing for, right? So that's kind of the gist of it. Is we try and make engineers more efficient in a way.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the whole idea of that software is just that one specific industry of engineering industry, taking all their data, collecting it, collating it into kind of one centralized location. And
yeah, in some sense, like we started with structural only, and we have been branching out into other engineering disciplines, but it probably will remain for a long time like an engineering focused one. But we do, we have some mechanical engineers, some electrical engineers, and we're still also learning about their industries. There's a lot of overlap, but then there's also bits where they are different, and that's part of our journey is we're learning how certain ones are different and how we can help the different ones also just be more efficient and use their time better.
Is that kind of like a future goal for the company, for design time, for Stack software to kind of just branch out, keep kind of going?
Yeah, it's an interesting question of where we want to go. I think right now we see that like smaller companies, especially, like we have a lot to offer. Bigger companies, like they do have a lot more processes and things in place, and Stack supports a decent amount of that, but there's also more we need to build to really give people like ways of really controlling and like limiting things. Whereas right now our focus is on letting someone who's like a small to medium team just again go really fast, make things easy. And so it's definitely part of our goal, but like for right now our focus is on like BC and Alberta, again because we have like a good inside knowledge of the rules and regulations, the professional bodies and the regulatory bodies and stuff in these spaces, so we know them well, so we're doing those really well first. But it would be natural, I think, to progress at least a little bit out there, but like longer term it's nice to dream, but we I think we have to get to a place where we are because we're a startup, and so we're trying to just get to a place where we have enough customers and we've got like a market share nicely cut for us, and we can take a step back and really examine where we want to go. And right now it's a bit more survival mode in the sense of just saying like we just want to make sure that this is like a viable thing first, right? Like that we have enough to sustain ourselves and so forth.
Okay. In closing, what would you say to somebody? Let's say you were approached by some young guy in grade 9 or 10 who says, "Hey, I'm kind of interested in programming. I don't really know much about it." What would you say to them to kind of where they should start, what they should focus on, and ultimately pay attention to? Taking things into consideration like AI, future careers, things like that.
Oh yeah, sure. I think I would try and like ask them some questions and just dig into like finding like, is there a problem that they want to solve, right? Or is there something they want to do? Like, because again, like I mentioned before, doing software for the sake of doing software is a harder path because you have to really force yourself to be disciplined. Whereas when you're driven by a goal, like you want to make a mortgage calculator or you want to make tic-tac-toe or something, like that drive is a huge factor in I think your success in what you learn. Because again, like, and I would say like don't shy away from using AI as a tool to help you learn, but at the same time, again, like be careful that it doesn't become a crutch, right? Like make sure that you get the basics down and you're practicing it and yeah, I think that is honestly the most important part. It's just like you know, sort of build stuff and do some stuff. Like the beautiful thing is like the internet has so many resources to learn from them. Like you know, like there's if one concept is explained badly somewhere or you don't click with it, you can literally find probably thousands of other videos that cover the same topic, or you can ask, you know, 3 or 4 different AIs to explain it to you, right? There isn't really a strong reason why you should be hard stuck, right? Like there's lots of ways to go. So the main thing is just like having a goal in mind, and there's lots of fun stuff. Like you know, you could, like I think games are a great starting point because they are a cool thing you can show off to family or friends, and you know. But if you're not into that kind of thing, then maybe you're into hiking, and then just think about like, you know, maybe there are lots of hiking apps, but you're not always trying to make something that's like a commercial success. You're just learning. So try to make a hiking tracking app. Try to make, I don't know, Tinder if you want to, right? Like make something that just you have a vision and a goal for, and then just go through this process of learning a lot of the problems and the tricky parts along the way, but learning them kind of the hard way, like getting stuck sometimes and figuring it out.
All right. Cool. Yeah. Well, thanks for the chat.
Yeah,
it was a great
Jeff.
conversation.
It's good to be here.
And appreciate you coming in and opening my mind more about software programming.
It was good to chat to you. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.